Hello, I'm Sandra Maxon, a member of the board of the Victoria Festival of Authors. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Queer Existence is Resistance, the Power of QT2BIPOC Futurisms, featuring authors Serena Bandar, Danny Ramadan, and Jaye Simpson. I want to start by acknowledging that although this is a virtual event with authors and audiences joining us from across Canada, Victoria Festival of Authors is located on the traditional ancestral territories of the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. We acknowledge the ancestors, hereditary leaders, and matriarchs, as well as the creators from these lands, and give thanks for the privilege of living and working here. We are committed to serving as listeners and learners. A thank you to our sponsors, the Victoria Arts Council, the BC Council of the Arts, the Canada Council of the Arts, the City of Victoria, CRD, Government of BC, the United Way of Greater Victoria, Monroe's Books, and the Writers Union. A special thank you to the Victoria Arts Council for generously sponsoring tonight's event. This event, and all VFA events, offers closed captioning. Please click the double C at the bottom of your screen to view captions. I also want to let you know that you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if you have questions for us or for the authors during the events. The moderator will be able to get to some of these questions near the end of the panel. Tonight's panel is curated and moderated by guest curator KP Dennis. KP Dennis is a Black, non-binary, multidisciplinary artist, producer, director, and activist. They were the 2016 Youth Poet Laureate of Victoria, received the VACCS Community Recognition Award in 2017, and toured two of their critically acclaimed shows, Monica vs. the Internet and Love Dub, across Canada in 2019. In 2020, they released their first chapbook, Growing Pains, available for purchase at their Instagram at starboy.dennis. They are currently working on their new play, 100 White Guys in an Hour, with Rage Sweater Theater Productions. Please welcome KP Dennis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to this panel today. I'm so excited. It's going to be amazing. I just want to say, that I'm broadcasting today from the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations after having resided on Lekwungen and Wasanich territories for 6 years. And I'm Afro-Caribbean of Jamaican and Indigenous Arawak peoples, as well as Sierra Leone of the Sherbro Islanders. And I often think about my place here now on Indigenous territories in Canada and what that means, what my place is, coming from the diaspora. And I know that Black liberations and Indigenous liberation is completely intertwined, so our histories are intertwined throughout colonization. And it's our job to do the work and to give back our wealth and our land and all of that constantly to make this work happen. And so I want to ask all of you just to really place yourselves right now and your lineage and how you got to be here, and think about things you can do in your everyday to really work towards our collective liberation. That means donating, that means talking to your friends and family. It also means thinking about different ways to donate, if you're a house, leave your inheritance, leave it to Indigenous nations, Indigenous people, give it up and do the work because it's going to make a really bright future. I'm really excited for it. That's what we're talking about today, futures and QT2BIPOC futurisms. Before we begin all of that and get into that stuff, I'm gonna start with our first reader and our first panelist of the night, and that is Serena Lukas Bhandar. And she is a Punjabi, Welsh, Irish, trans femme witch, youth worker, and facilitator living as a settler in Lekwungen and Wasanich territories. Her Pushcart Prize-nominated writing has appeared in print in Nameless Woman and Turn This World Inside Out, The Emergence of Nurturance Culture, among other places. She's currently working on a novel and a hybrid collections of essays and poetry. So please welcome Serena Lukas Bhandar.
Thanks, KP. That was such a wonderful introduction. As KP mentioned, I am working on a couple different books right now. However, I'm going to read from neither of those today for you. So I think I'll just launch into it. These are some poems that I wanted to share with you all. The first ones that I wrote are a triptych titled 3 Letters from San Junipero. And they have a little preamble before I get into the actual poems. So I'll just start. I first wrote these 3 poems last year when it seemed as though post-apocalypse was much further off. San Junipero, of course, is a place that only exists in digital and audiovisual imaginings. But I hoped that this queer heaven would still eventually be a place on earth. Each stanza can be read with each successive line following separately from the first, like choose your own adventure, like parallel universes, like any future is still possible. Today, as biological gender essentialism burns through the ravaged rainforests of the Pacific coast, as a virus ignites our society's darkest vengeances and exposes our deepest fears, and as trans women of color continue to be attacked and harassed, both online and off, I return to San Junipero now as a nigh impossible dream, not as a someday potentiality. We are woven, limbs spread across your coat, on the grass as serpents, and our lips flutter and swim, hands playing my hair like a harp. Our kisses, taste of London fogs, shared before the Daydream interlude, were non-existent. As they whisper mist from our mouths, are everything. My senses peak at brushed tongues, fingers entwined, and sing sunlight, your body and mine. We dwell on cushions made of careful, wrapped in weightless promise, adrift and darkened daydream. We ask to make it hurt, our intimate selves, couched between will and want. We tease, show me my heart and I'll show you yours. On the screen, fantasy flickers and fades, subtitles fly by, reveals unspoken futures. We are mirrored, brown woman and white, kissing in my kitchen, curled on the carpet, as we divine what is real from what is reality. We are rare, creatures breaking habit in remembering ancestral love, messages from future cultures, not heard for now, but not forever. Can you believe you were the first to buy me flowers? I can speak with cats and snakes and spiders, that you're beautiful. Somehow, fire cannot quench water, nor water extinguish spark. And to know that, just as we can't appreciate a mistake until it's made, we can't yet see the bitter, strange path our lives may take. So that's the first set of poems. Just making sure that it came across okay. And I'll jump to the next set. I wrote this quite recently in response to an experience I had in online dating. And it'll make sense once you hear the title. The title is, When He Asks You for a Vag Pic. I've slept with hundreds of women, and none of theirs looked like that. Hundreds of women, he says? Consider, then ask, were theirs all the same? Sweet and pink and small and neat, curious, virginal, untouched by even their own hands? Or flushed and dripping, open stretched mouth, not blossoming rose, lips like red fire, desire, beckoning, waiting for him to make whole. Consider, then ask, but what about women with thick, big lips, women with thick, big clits, women with hair everywhere, and women without, women with wrinkled folds, labia like the pages of a book, pale and dry, leftover bits of toilet paper tucked away, women with mottled skin, stretch marks, chafing bruises, women and others with clits freed from clitoral hoods, genitals reclaimed with names like front hole, like dick, women and others with minora torn from childbirth, with fistulas fixed, women and others, non-binary, intersex. There's at least 1 in every 100. Consider women young and women old, women black and women brown, women cis and women trans. Hundreds of women, he says. Consider, maybe men don't deserve to see us as we are. Maybe all women are an omen of men's failure to love us as we are. Thanks, folks.
Wow, that was so beautiful, Serena. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay, wow. All right, well, we'll move on to Danny Ramadan, and he is an award-winning Syrian-Canadian author and LGBTQ refugee activist. The Clothesline Swing, Ramadan's debut novel, won the Independent Publisher Book Award for LGBT Fiction, the Canadian Authors Association's Award for Best Fiction, and was shortlisted for Evergreen Award, Sunburst Award, and a Lambda Award. It was longlisted for Canada Reads 2018. The novel was translated to French, German, and Hebrew. His children's book, Selma, the Syrian Chef, was released in March 2020 by Anik Press. He lives with his husband, Matthew Ramadan, in Vancouver. Woo!
Thank you so much for hosting me. I really appreciate it. Hi, KP. I also come from the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. As a person who came here to Canada as a newcomer, as a refugee, I trade this land shyly, and I trade them with care, because I truly am an uninvited guest to this land, and I find myself thinking about that and thinking about the colonization that this land has witnessed, which is the same source of colonization that 100 years ago was witnessed on my land, the place that we call Syria at the moment. And the civil war and the refugee crisis is a latent effect of that colonization. I also would like to acknowledge that my privilege as the only cis male person on this panel. So I'm going to try my very best to keep my mansplaining to myself. And I'm going to go right ahead and read from the Clothesline Swing. This is a scene that I insisted to have at the very beginning of the book. It's about two queer brown boys going at it, really. And I think there's nothing more beautiful than queer love in the face of war and the face of destruction. Our morning coffees on my balcony were frequently interrupted by the shouts and screams of army officers and the police. Running after a person to arrest, they would pull on the prisoner's shirt and drag him to the ground, while the woman and his family wailed in agony from their windows, tightening their white scarves upon their heads. The prisoner would be pushed into the trunk of a car under the eyes of gazers, among them you and me, before they locked the trunk on him and drove away. The first time we saw that scene, our hearts bounced and we hid in my bedroom for 2 hours. After a couple of arrests, we got used to the screaming and wailing, and we would just return to our morning coffee and turn the radio back on. I lost count of how many times we woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of distant explosions coming from the other side of the city. The calm of the streets carried the sounds of war swiftly to our ears and woke us both up, frightened and lonely. You whined one night, half asleep, pulled out of your land of dreams, worrying the explosion were too close to us. I brushed your hair with my fingers, calming you down. It's fireworks. It's just the sound of fireworks. I whispered to you, and you went back to sleep. One night, the explosion was too close. It shook the apartment and woke us both up. We heard the explosion and thought it might have happened right outside our building. It was followed by the sound of machine guns rushing through the streets. We crawled on all fours as we escaped the exposed bedroom to the windowless bathroom. I laid down in the bathroom tub and you rested your body upon mine. Your eyes were wide, like small white dishes. You shivered and started to bite your lips. I got you, I whispered, and hugged you closer until the sound of machine guns morphed into an unrecognizable noise. That night in the tub, I made love to you. I made love to you as if we were reciting poetry about the beauty of Damascus. I woke your senses with opening lines and flirtatious gestures, sneaking into your word like the first drops of sun rays on the mountains of our city. I colored your face with the shades of sunrise as I pulled on your earlobes with my teeth. I roamed the corners of your body like a lost traveler, exploring the old sleepy streets of the city, knocking on the doors of your soul with the tips of my fingers, like a shy delivery boy knocking on the wooden doors of old homes in Saruja, carrying warm bread and beledi cheese. I turned your body around and I tickled your feet, and you laughed like a child riding a joyride in an amusement park. I murmured whimpers of pleasure in your ears, like the sighs of an old wooden bridge aching under the pressure of the souls it carries. I joined my body with yours, and we moved as if we're slipping up and down the hills of the wavy roads of Al-Muhajirin. I printed breathless kisses on your forehead while I let your body slip away from mine, covered in my bite marks and glorious sweat. By the time we opened the bathroom door and returned to bed, the sound of machine guns fire was long gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wow, so beautiful. So much talent on this panel today. Wow, all right. I'll introduce the last panelist today, who is Jaye Simpson. And Jaye Simpson is an Oji Cree Saulteaux indigenous queer writer with roots in Sepatuwek Cree Nation. They often write about being queer in the child welfare system, as well as being queer and indigenous. Their work has been featured in Poetry is Dead, This Magazine, Prism International, Sad Mag, Guts Magazine, and Room. Simpson resides in the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations peoples, currently and colonially known as Vancouver, BC. Welcome, Jaye.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Anim Buju Nigijnaga Jaye Simpson. I would like to recognize and acknowledge that I am coming from my living room in the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and also name that I have a great-great-grandparent who is very white and very Scottish, whose side of the family moved to Victoria long ago and had colonizer history there. So whenever I come to Victoria, I always try to acknowledge that even though I am Indigenous, part of my family did enact a lot of violence on those territories, and be mindful as such, and acknowledge and recognize that as a mixed person, I contain multitudes of accountability. This poem is about accountability. Can y'all hear me fine? Great. Ngoja Wenong Peterborough. Lavender shortbread dipped in London fog foam, a quaint cafe appropriately named Black Honey. In Negotiawanong, Peterborough, a rainy day signaled my the end of my time here. I'd come to realize many things. That I loved too deeply, too ferociously, too hard, and I fell too often. That tiptoe, touch and go love affair, and I use the word affair because that's what it felt like, had been built on too many maybes and possiblies, and I'm confused. Indecisiveness, a fog of uncertainty, and at times I felt left in the dark, and you embarrassed to have even had feelings for me. You said, I like the distance between us, and how just before you said that, I wanted to shorten the distance between you and I was and still am fault lines and fallen leaves, fragments and fissures, placed too much ideation in another, hoped to be whatever you wanted, didn't listen when I wasn't what you were looking for and blamed you for it. Wrong of me to ask you to want me. Still, I faulted you. The Sapphic poets didn't teach how to be accountable when yearning. To be upfront is a gambit. Want to be touched when the sun shone on my face just right. After having swum in the Pacific, brine making my skin salty and hair curly, the good kind of salt. And to feel that instead of licking up sulfur from Mother Four's garden. You didn't know me in mine. Between the strawberries and rhubarb, by the thyme and golden sage, and Salem's rosemary, right by the cardamom plant and basil, when I was happier with what was and what wasn't. Never told you what I wanted, prayed you tell me you wanted more. That much I know how to perform. Cruel the affection, severe the incision, and jealousy was never a good look on me. Lavender shortbread dipped in London fog foam, a quaint cafe appropriately named Black Honey. This ruin is my design. My next poem is a poem someone told me they read to their date. And it's very interesting because I was like, you read that poem because I've got love poems in here and you didn't read the love poem? All right, okay. And it's about intergenerational trauma, so. And I'm like, y'all, okay. Inheritance. I have my father's hands, wide and unforgiving, never knowing strength to hold on tight enough. Sometimes the only inheritance a child gets is the reminder of how unwanted they were, features left only to haunt. I have my mother's smile, wide and unwavering, knowing all too well the end in the beginning, loving the idea of someone so much, she passed on to me this legacy of longing. I know my father through grainy Facebook photo, cursor hovering over send. How would he react to a daughter with his hands? He wanted his ill-begotten son to learn how to snare and hunt and trap. Now he's got a child called Trap and Trick. I am pieces of them, flesh and bone their tragedy. I, child made folly, what parts of me are mine if I'm still scared of an absentee father's opinion? Okay, so I'm wearing a cloak. It's very hot, so I'm just gonna take it off and be this very bright pink shirt that reminds me of Crystal Method. Doesn't it, KP? Yeah? Thank you. Okay. This poem, it's called It Is Too Late. I wrote it in Banff after Kinesia Lubrin told us to eavesdrop on people. And I was like, oh, you're asking us to do that? I do that every day. So it's a pretty easy poem to write. Dispersion settles in the unsettled, amongst children born into unknowing, if the flora can speak the same tongue. Can the stunted birch at Trout Lake Park speak Nehianoan or Anishinaabemoan, the way the skyward birch with prairie storms sing to pickerel and a mick in Skownan? Maybe you can relearn, unlearn the feeling of me mama pulled from throat, flayed tongue worn a nun's habit 3 matriarchs back. Do you think they too are eavesdropping? Our ancestors, I mean. Do you think they understood why their kin speak their abuser's language? I think they understand enough when I cry out for home, land, desperate in this diaspora, ravenous to belong to it before. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for your readings and sharing your art and for being here for this discussion today. And so just a refresher for everyone, we are talking about the power of QT2BIPOC futurisms and the importance of like reframing the world we currently inhabit, the roles of storytelling, joy's evolution, and what's next, all of that good stuff. So I think I'll just jump right into the first question, which is, you know, QT2BIPOC liberation in your own lives. How did you find it? How do you practice it? And how does it affect your work? Which is a big question, and maybe you don't have an answer or you haven't, but I feel like there's like joy and love and all of that and like transcends through all of your works. So yeah, QT2BIPOC liberation. How is it? What is it? How do you practice it? How does it affect your work?
Should I start?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, I'll take it. QT2BIPOC liberation is something that I came into as someone who lived in a smaller town, who didn't know a lot about much as a like indigenous, specifically a white native, a white indigenous person. But as I began to radically shift, even though that wasn't much of a leap for me, because when I was 7, I started petitions for owls. So, but I started at camp out where I discovered the term QT2BIPOC, and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. There's a word, there's all of this. And then I quickly realized that even though there was a title, there's so much oppression. And I began to realize how uncomfortable people were with having conversations around QT2BIPOC liberation. And so I began to have really hard conversations with people, like really hard conversations where I was just unafraid to have those conversations. And then I got a really bad narrative, and I got a really bad reputation for being a villain. And I said, you know what, if this is what you're going to do to an Indigenous trans woman, I can only imagine what you're going to do to a dark-skinned Black trans woman. And so I just don't back down. And I think we should not be responsible for our own liberation because we did not ask for the oppressions. And if you want to give me a house, you can give me a house, but that's not liberation enough.
Wow, beautiful, strong answer. That's so amazing. I wonder what kind of like hard conversations did you have before I get to everybody else?
In my university, I told the president of the Pride Club that he was racist, and he proceeded to kick me out of the Pride Club, which actually was against the rules of the Student Society. And in retaliation, I ran for the LGBTQ rep in the Student Society and got it, and cut most of his funding. So,
incredible.
Did I accidentally cancel a Pride Club? Maybe so. And then I got called homophobic, and I said, at the time I was gay, so I was really shocked. I was like, okay. I did not win a second year in a row because I oftentimes would not approve grant funding to white people who I knew were racist. So I did not gain a lot of favor from a lot of folks for just like having my foot down all the time.
Wow. Well, we appreciate it now. So they're all talkers. Thank you for your work. Who would like to answer next?
Please go ahead, Serena.
Sure, I will. Thanks, Danny. God, that's a really good question, KP. And I think I definitely echo Jay. I think that as much as I just want white people to just pay for us to be liberated, like that's not gonna happen, I think. Like outside of events like these where we get paid to talk, it's it's just not a libertary kind of framework if we just, stay in a capitalist mode. And I think about like the work that I've done with the UKP on the Color Coded Collective here in Victoria, and how incredible it is just to connect with other QT2BIPOC folks. And yeah, I mean, just having people in my life is liberation. Having community in my life is liberation. Having a connection to my faith and to my ancestry is liberation. And having that outside of a context where it's either monetized or there are strings attached to it. And I think that's a thing that I really struggle with. I've recently been wanting to connect more with my Punjabiness, and that ties in a lot with the book that I'm writing, which is derived from a Punjabi folktale. And so I want to, reconnect with that, go to the Gurdwara, the temple more often. And then of course COVID hit, and I had no way of actually connecting in person with my ancestry, which was really hard. So lately that's just looked like trying to learn Punjabi through apps and, stuff like Duolingo, as opposed to being able to connect with people in person. But I am looking forward to more events like these where I can connect with people, and trying to spend time with people in socially distanced and safe ways is really important for me. So much of my writing is that collaborative mode. It's born out of me coming together and creating together. And I'm grateful that we have spaces like this. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's really beautiful. I feel, really similar. I recently just moved to what's currently known as Vancouver. And I feel like, because I'm like by myself, just me and my partner, if I'm online, it's like Instagram horror show, or just like in the sunshine cut off. And I'm like, where's the community? Where is everyone? It's hard because of COVID and liberation that it really feels to being all here together. So thanks for being here together, and thank you for your answers. Really beautiful. Danny.
Well, to be honest, it's hard to follow such beautiful answers by both the other panelists, but I'll try my best. So I think that there are two clear stages for me to queer liberation. The first one is when I was back in Syria, which was the place I was born, and a place, to be honest, riddled with homophobia, which is a very simplified way to talk about a country, because at the end of the day, the country is more complex, just more than, and it's not just being homophobic, it's also the place where I was born, the place where I got my culture, the place where I got my heritage and my traditions and the language I speak. So yes, I would say that Syria is a homophobic place, but that's not the end of that story. And I ended up doing a lot of work in Syria, in Egypt, when I lived in Egypt, around supporting the LGBTQ community in on the ground over there. But then that narrative completely flipped on its head when I ended up becoming a refugee and then coming here to Canada in 2014, because I was privately sponsored through Rainbow Refugee. And that meant that 7 or 8 people came together and were like, yeah, we want him. And they applied on my behalf, and the Canadian government was like, yeah, you can invite this person over to come to Canada. My group of sponsors were all white, all gay men, all much older than me. And when I arrived, I was presented with this new narrative that I had to swallow, which is, you're gay, and gay here is good, it's okay, so now everything is fine. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a person of color, and I'm seeing racism in everything around me, and I'm navigating this racism in the dynamic that I have with you as my sponsors, because you're trying to inflict this narrative that is extremely foreign to me, where I'm becoming a pineapple. Pineapple is the word? No, not pineapple. What's the other one? Brown on the outside, white on the inside. Coconut. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. So yes, I was becoming a coconut, where I was asked to be brown on the outside, but shown that any other way other than gratitude to being gay in the Vancouver West End is bad. And I think that's when I started taking more steps towards seeking a community of like-minded folks, seeking the QT2BIPOC community, folks that will help me educate myself. Some of my earliest educators was this trans person that I met working at a local community center called Community, Aish, and I hold a lot of care and love for Aish because they truly were there to support me, understand my position as a person of color, but also understand queerness, understand transness, and understand my position also towards Indigenous folks.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, this isn't a question that I wrote down, but I feel like all of your answers kind of spoke to work a lot in your liberation. And so I wonder about how do you like kind of create this this liberation for yourselves, like in rest and in peace and in your day-to-day? What does that look like or feel like? And is it possible in this war that we're in? Yeah, and I'll throw that back to Jay again.
The devil works hard, but I work harder. And so like at times of like, where's the rest? Like, where's this peace? I'm at times very unfamiliar with it. But then also at the same time, I get to log off and I get to just like walk down the street and be okay with it while I have kin who don't get that experience. So inherently, even though I don't feel like I'm rested, I do get rest. I think community has really come forward at times now and begun to have some hard conversations so that other folks can rest. But I really don't see there being enough folks taking on the baggage that needs to be taken on, specifically like white folks. I know you had earlier, you said a lot about Indigenous solidarity, but I also do believe land back includes Black folks, and there is a balance here that needs to be maintained in order for us to have liberation and peace. My biggest thing is always just like white folks really need to be educating themselves, and if they can't educate themselves, they need to have a very large budget to be asking folks to educate themselves. That includes health and benefits long term.
Yes, thank you. I so agree. Health and benefits, like this work, it's exhausting and it takes our lives away. It's stressful. It's hard. So yes, thank you. Wow. Serena.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about health and benefits, like I am grateful to be working in my day job in a place that's fairly supportive, is fairly led by women of color. I work at the Sexual Assault Center at the University of Victoria. And yeah, it's a space that feels very supportive. And at the same time, it exists a framework in the university that is still very white-led. We recently hired, the university recently chose its new president, and against calls for, more diverse hires and, more just centering of diversity in the process, they went with another white guy, which is incredibly frustrating and really alienating, I think, given that I've spent a lot of time at QT2BIPOC. All that to say that I think it's important that we also be aware of the subtle ways in which white supremacy shows up in the work. There's a really great piece of writing talking about not the six elements. I can't remember the number of them, but they're the elements of white supremacy. And it talks about perfectionism and a really attention to time and worship of the written word, and how those are all different elements that are used to advance white supremacy in many different ways. And I can't really do justice speaking to it right now, that I would encourage people to look up these elements and to be a bit more aware of the way that they occupy space in the world. Because white supremacy isn't just blatant racism, it's such of the so much of the subtle kind of ways that we inhabit the world. And I've forgotten what our question was. I think it was about rest and relaxation or something, but yeah, again, like with Jay, I feel like I have none of that these days, especially with us being online all these times, all these days, and so much screen time that I experience these days, working remotely. And I don't know if I've felt rested in a very long time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, I'll pass it on to Danny.
I don't know if I felt rested in a long time either. It feels sometimes that I haven't slept since 2004. It's just, honestly, I think that there's the system that is overwhelming of white supremacy, of racism within the system itself, that says that there is a certain number of seats that are now welcome just so we could feel better about ourselves, for inclusivity and diversity, where we have like 4 seats for Indigenous women and 2 seats for Indigenous men and 3 seats over there for trans folks. And I feel like that hierarchy that the system itself created has left 1 seat for the refugee queer Syrian dude over there. It's just, I'm just too niche. I have been doing this panel tours. I've been doing this conversations, those attempts to read and write about the queer Syrian refugee experience for years now. And the first time that I was on the same panel with another queer Syrian refugee person was 2 months ago. It's overwhelming how much it takes of you when you realize that you are alone in the level of support that you're receiving. And I don't want to like say this and then distinguish from my own work. I work hard, I'm a hustler, I write the books, I do the work, I do my own events. Jay was on one of my events a couple of months ago. I try my very best to do my job because I do see this as my job as well as my passion, as well as my hobby. But I wish sometimes that there's somebody else, like if you're out there, if you're a queer Syrian person with a refugee experience or a queer person with a refugee experience who wants to be supported, come to me and I would love to lift you up, because I am tired and I would love to have other folks over there to shine with me, and I would love to work with them so we can break this classroom systems of we have 30 seats and the left hand seats are over there and that's what you get.
Wow, thank you. I think that leads me nicely into the next question of kind of opening those doors and really showing how like sharing your art and your storytelling really opens the doors to more people, and it's lonely work. And we're trying to make it less lonely and bring more people in and rechange the system completely. And so I guess I wonder, what is the power and importance of QT2BIPOC futurisms and liberation in shaping and reframing the world we currently inhabit? The gay agenda, if you will. What is the importance of it? How does it work? Yeah. And we'll start with Serena this time.
Sure. Gosh, could you repeat the question? It was a beautiful question, and I think I just got lost somewhere halfway through because it touches on so many different points that I think it's really important. Yeah, so like I guess like yeah, how do our ideas of futurisms for us, you know, shape and change the gay agenda, as you say?
Yeah.
That kind of what we're getting at. Yeah. I can relate to Jay's experience of being in a student union and being surrounded by whiteness. That was a very similar experience I had at UVic, and I still care about those white folks. I am friends with many of them still, and And yet I sometimes wonder if I would have realized that I'm trans, to be frank, if I would have realized a lot sooner, if I had been around more people like me, more people who shared either identities of racialization or of being trans, feminine. And I am so grateful that I have connected with a lot of BIPOC, trans, femme, and AMAB folks over the most recent years of my life, and that's been so incredible for me, having that sisterhood and siblinghood. And I think, yeah, having these networks where we're just excluding, I think, the white folks, and we're having networks of our own and communities of our own to have a place for that within queer and trans culture, spaces where we can be ourselves and not have to exist in relation to whiteness. Because I think a lot of the ways that we talk about our identities are still really informed, I think, by a centering of whiteness. When we think of like racialization, whites don't get racialized. Like white is a race, but it isn't really seen as a race in many ways. And I mean, it's also complicated. Like I do have white ancestry on my mother's side, and I also want to engage with the different ways that my ancestors have been both colonizers and colonized in different ways. And I just want more space to be made where we don't have to exist in relation to any sort of dominant identity, where we can just be us. Yeah.
Beautiful answer. Thank you. It's so important. Space outside of whiteness. Wow. Thank you. Jay.
I think it's been very difficult at times, specifically as like an Indigenous trans woman in Canlit. The only person right now is Ariel Twist, and this year we went through a very traumatic experience of a person in community be very unaccountable and race shifting, and took a lot of space, resources, and money from Indigenous trans women in Canada, and we've just been robbed. We've been decimated. And it's been unfortunate because it sucks right now that currently there are only 2 of us alive right now. There was Ayana Miracle, who was really a forefront person, but it's hard to feel like you're making enough space when the space you thought you were being given was actually being taken from you. So now I just have this like overwhelming sense of dread that I'm not giving enough space, and I'm not giving it enough appropriately in a way that is no strings attached, because I find that in Canlit, in my beginning experiences, specifically in the QT2BIPOC community, there were people who wanted to give me space, but it was transactional. And as long as I listened to them and hated the same people as them, I was welcome at their table. And when I left that kind of narrative, it was me who got the problematic rap. And now I'm just at odds, because I want to talk about QT2BIPOC Futurisms by also including the fact that we are at times fighting ourselves because of the narrative that there's only 7 spots at the table, like Danny was talking about, when in actuality, like, Black folks built the table, Indigenous people were killed for the land that the house is on, and there needs to be more conversations on like how like we should be the entirety in some situations. It's very tricky, because this year I'm just at such a loss, and I'm in such a mourning of like how space is given and how space is taken. I hope my legacy is a legacy of just giving without any questions or any conditions or any like transactions. Like I really want to lift up other folks and lift up other QT2BIPOC, and I will always refer to someone else at times. Like in many situations, I'll be like, I'm not the person for that. Can you book someone else? And I'll give them a list of like 20 people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, thank you. Danny.
It's really hard to think about the future when we are navigating at the moment the present that we're living in, where and aside from like the obvious of COVID-19 and Donald Trump and all of that, we are still living in this room, this table that Jay was talking about, where we are assigned the chairs that we are assigned. And I look forward to a day that in the future we can break away this whole table thing and just open the windows and have a park outside or something. I don't know. Just outside of this whole table metaphor that has been quite limiting, to be honest, because there's always going to be a limited number of chairs around the table. I hope that one day we can have that open field situation. We can be all there to uplift one another, specifically when whiteness has been trying to infiltrate, in a way, those kind of conversations we're having. The person that Jay was talking about a couple of minutes ago, who infiltrated the indigenous trans community, for example, was somebody that I looked up to, and I never questioned, and I had friendships with, and then I felt quite betrayed, because a big base of why we started that friendship, why I shared parts of myself with that person, is the fact that I connected with that person from the experience of being both people of color. So feeling that betrayal specifically made it difficult to navigate that space that we're talking about. From a personal level also, like just looking from within me, whiteness has been part of my experience since the day I was born across the world. Like the TV shows that we see, the music that we listen to, whatever that is queer has been since the 80s, since the 90s, in relation to whiteness, in connection with whiteness. We are told that the white body, the white face, the white features are what's beautiful. We are taught that since I was 14 and I was in love with the Backstreet Boys. So, and I still am. God knows, like I'm married to a 6'1" white man. He literally is from Saskatchewan. He's a cowboy, but
Is he?
I mean, Matthew, he wants to be a cowboy. Let's put it that way. But the idea is like, I love my husband and everything, but I do still feel that part of why I was attracted to him in the first place is that whiteness has inserted itself into my subconscious and told me beauty is white. Wow. He's a much better human right now. Like I adore him. He's an amazing human, in and out. He's going to kill me when he sees this. But I would say that the very first step that attracted me to him was truly his whiteness.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense. Whiteness really is taught and deep inside of this whole structure. We live inside of white supremacist structure. And so I really feel like I'm hearing that it's hard to think about, futurisms and liberation when what we're living in right now is so oppressive. And so like the rest and the work towards this futurism, like it's really hard to do, and also shouldn't be just our work alone. And so I wonder, as like writers, as poets, as storytellers, what is the role of this work in the uprisings, in this revolution, and in undoing the system? What is the role of a storyteller? And I think I'll start with Serena again.
Wonderful. What I think about a lot when I think about my writing is being able to connect with ancestries that have been erased, and connect with stories that don't really exist because, not because they never happened, but because, again, they were forgotten or deliberately removed from our histories. I mean, the big one that I'm thinking of is the burning of the Institute of Sexology in Berlin during the rise of the Nazis, which was a center of massive trans liberation and understanding of how our bodies worked and how we could just become who we wanted to be. But going even further back, I think of all of the trans ancestors that we have who have been forgotten or, again, erased, or there was never a space for them to begin with. And that's a lot of what my writing is about, is just trying to recreate what could have been, trying to find those hints and those seeds in old folk tales or in stories where maybe it isn't a trans person, but it is somebody who didn't fit within gender as it was understood at the time. And I think that is my role, is to, bring back these histories, recognize that the world was always more beautiful than I think we expected it to be, and so full of radiance and representation, and really just destroy the idea that transness and that queerness is new, and that and just explain that we have always been here. I think that's what I want to leave the next generations of trans folks understanding, and the cis world beyond that, that they are not the norm and they are not the default, and that they are not as strong as they think they are. And just really speak truth to power, to be really succinct.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Wow. Bringing history and retelling history as more beautiful than we've been taught it, I think is really, really powerful. Thank you. Let's do Danny.
Sure. I would say the role of the artist, the creative, the storyteller, specifically when we're coming from the QT2BIPOC community, is whatever the fuck that storyteller wants to do at the time of asking the question. I honestly am outside of this idea of that I have to represent, because at the end of the day, I'm representing my own experience, my own lived experience. And the tiniest little change of factors into an experience can change it quite dramatically. So my experience as a cis male, queer person of color with a refugee experience would be extremely different than the experience of a trans woman refugee of color. And their narrative and my narrative are vastly different. So I wouldn't be able to tell you that story, nor would I want to be able to tell you that story. So I think it's important to me to recognize that my experience is my own lived experience, and that's what I can present in my history, in my heritage, and the way that I understand it through the politics of the day, through the erasure of some of our history, because at the end of the day, history is written by the victorious. And when it comes to a place like Syria, I honestly cannot tell you which history book is real and which is created by a propaganda for one regime or another. So my own views into that history also factors into the way that I represent my culture. So I would say that my experience represents only myself, and there's no way for me to present more than that. I do believe that my voice is quote unquote unique. I do believe that it's important to be included in the conversation. I do believe that I'm presenting one of the aspects of being a queer person of color, but I don't think that I am by far the only voice that deserves that space. Nor do I think that I should be the person who's being asked to represent the space. Sometimes I do want to. Sometimes I'm happy to do the monkey dance. Hey, look at my book, and look at the fundraising I'm doing, and the support to this organization or that organization, and whatever. Like, I'm happy to do the monkey dance. And sometimes I just want to cuddle and watch a horror movie. Like, I think it is really depends on the artist, on the spot, and when you ask them, and what they have the mental capacity to do.
Thank you. I think that really speaks to the importance of like your story and you as who you are as a person telling your story as a QT2BIPOC person, like is enough. You existing, telling your story is enough. And that's awesome. Thank you. Jay Simpson.
Hi, I think what Danny and Serena said are so fantastic. As an Indigenous person, queerness and transness is a colonial word, and it's a colonial term, and the idea of that has always just been a way to create normalcy in cisness and whiteness. And I always, as someone who was in foster care and persecuted for being queer and Indigenous, I always thought I was so alone. I always thought I was the only queer Indigenous person in the whole wide world. Like there wasn't even a second that I knew that there was another person until many years later. And I think my duty and my role is to be as loud as possible, to be like, you are not alone. You've never been alone. They've just erased as much history as they could. We, as an Indigenous person who has oral storytelling, like libraries that have been burned, our bodies were burned and our stories were burned, and what stories we have now are very limited, but we get them back in our dreams. We get our language back in our dreams. We get our experiences back. And to say that I haven't been dreaming is disingenuous, and I've been writing and writing and writing and telling stories, but also the idea that there can only be one is a white construct, and the fact that there can only be one spokesperson is a white construct, and it's just simply not true. It's not true. Like, you know, we see it in everything we do, and we're taught, as in my experiences in the beginnings of the QT2BIPOC community, was like a culture of scarcity, and I truly believe that was it is white supremacy, is the culture of scarcity. And also the idea that disagreement is lateral violence is white supremacy, because inherently we should be able to disagree with each other and be okay, as long as it doesn't impede on our rights and our ability to be free. But I think our responsibility and our role is to make sure that we survive and we live. And I always say, like, I do this for the children, and I do it for those to come after, because as an Indigenous trans woman, I recognize my time here is very short, and I don't know what will happen, and it's a very scary thing, but I've come to terms with knowing that overall, to believe myself anything other than human is delusion, because we are all here for blinks of time. It's our jobs, I think, to live and find joy, and to imbue that QT2BIPOC joy in those around us and our community and our kin.
Wow, beautiful, thank you. Yeah, wow, okay, so I was reading this book, a collection of sci-fi, kind of like sci-fi social justice, like short stories. And in the intro, I forget her name right now, but she's a Black woman. She said that, you know, our existence right now, here as we are, like, is science fiction, because there was no real way that, like, we should have made it, and like our ancestors like dreamed us up, and through dream became, yes, Octavia's brood. It's so good. That intro honestly blew my mind. Yes. QT2BIPOC Futurisms, y'all are the best. And so within that, y'all know I'm going to say that, you know, we're science fiction, and we live in this post-apocalyptic world, and we are sci-fi, and we are breaking all forms of reality by being here and still going forward and still creating this future. And so I guess I wonder, like, since science fiction imagines what could be from what was and what is, how do you work, or in your life, create the future from what was and like your ancestral ways of being and what is, and how do you work towards future work, which is tough. So yeah, that's my question. I can clarify if that was confusing. And we'll start with Jay.
Oh, oh, I was science fiction, as an Indigenous person who's experienced many apocalypses, is so integral, because science fiction as an idea to us is fictional, but I believe it's science nonfiction at this point, because what we're experiencing is a futurism that our ancestors couldn't even fathom, and that technological progression has given us access to time travel and teleport across the known worlds. Like, you know, we're having this dialogue from an expanse of territories and an expanse of lands, but to take joy in that without acknowledging the resource extraction and genocide is complicated, because I believe what I'm striving for is a sci-fi utopia, but honestly, to aim for a utopia without recognizing the trauma and the genocide that got us there is disingenuous. So I think it's one of those complicated situations where we can strive for this utopia, but we need to be ever cognizant and aware. And I was reading this book about mermaids, and specifically they were born from Black women thrown overboard slave ships, and that one of the roles was the storyteller. And it reminded me of The Giver, where one person was assigned a historian. And I don't believe that we need to move in that way of one person being a historian. We need to move in a way that we all maintain our histories and learn our histories. The Deep, yes, thank you. It's on my office behind the TV. So I was reading the Deep, and I think we, as much nonlinear time, if we're going to move forward, we also have to move backwards. And to dream of a future of liberation is just so important. And I have a science fiction short, In Love After the End. It's an anthology of two-spirit indigenous speculative fiction. So if you want to read that, you can read it. And it's just, Octavia's Brood, also, if you haven't read it, honestly, was the most amazing collection I had read, and that was introduced to me by Joe Billows and Amal Rana.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, all of that. Yes, you have to move forwards and move backwards. And yeah, just, I'll move on to Serena, because
yeah,
look great.
Yeah, that was great, Jay. Yeah, I think I echo that. Time for me looks non-linear. When we think of the future, we think of what remains constant and what can we actually find in the past. And there's a book that I've been writing in my head for a long time, a series of books really, taking the framework of J.K. Rowling, J.K. Turf Lane, J.K. horrible person Lane, her witches and wizards kind of world, but actually transposing it into a sci-fi context, into a interstellar space context, because I think there's so much magic in the universe, and once we actually start going out into the universe, we're going to be seeing so much representation of so much radical otherness and so much non-binariness and so much queerness in the universe. And we still see that here on Earth too. We see so many different genders and sexualities expressed in the natural world. And I think it's incredible to be able to look at our histories and to recognize that we are not the only species on this planet that has worth. And so yeah, to look forward is to also look back and to look where we've come from. And so if we ever make it off this rock, I think it'll be incredibly illuminating. And I love to explore that kind of future and through writing. And I want to be able to explore like what does magic look like outside of Earth, and how queer can it be? How beautiful can it be? Because I think when we stay limited just to thinking in our own world, if we don't reach our toes deep into the earth and we don't stretch our hands up and we stayed limited just to, you know, the pavement and the glass and the just the world around us, which is very limiting and very colonized in every aspect, then we limit ourselves so much. And there's so much world out there, and it has a history and it has a future, and I want to be there for it. Yeah, it's weird to be in this space where you occupy an identity which has seen a lot of violence. You know, trans women of color, specifically Black and Indigenous trans women, get murdered every day, pretty much. And yet I also struggle with my own demons, with my own mental health, and have come closer to death through that kind of avenue often. And so to live that close to death also, it really changes the way you look at the future. And the future feels so much closer for some reason. And yet so far away. Yeah, I'm not sure where to resolve this, but yeah, I think you know what, death is something that really impacts the way that I view the future as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I think all that magic and is like, we are magic, and transness and queerness, like, I don't know, it's embodiment of magic, I feel. And what you're saying about death too really does change a lot of things. And yeah, the way we view the future, that makes it shorter and closer and further away. My brother was thinking, he was like, maybe I should just wear black for the rest of the year because of the constant mourning and the deaths every day. And I know Erica Hart poses, you know, how do you like feel joy and like pleasure in this endless grief and all of that? So how do you move forward through all of that? I think that's really beautiful, and a really great questions. And like you said, how do you resolve it? I don't know if it can't be resolved. So thank you, Serena. And moving on to Danny.
I think we can move on to the next question. Jay and Serena just had a fantastic, and then your reflection on it were fantastic. So let's just move on to the next question. You don't need me to repeat exactly the same things that those two wonderful folks put on for the listeners.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
totally. And this kind of derails, I guess, your questions, but KP, would you like to answer any of the questions you've asked us so far?
Oh,
I wonder, yeah, if Danny and Jay are okay with that, yeah.
Oh, I like all of your answers. I don't know. I feel like you've said mostly what I feel, really. I think sci-fi and magic is everything I do. And I think I'm personally working through how to feel joy and peace in the everyday when it's trying to be like snatched from you at every second of every hour, and how to like harbor the spirit in the way that it can feel good and grow and give. And I've just been writing this 10-minute play for a company which will be announced soon. And I feel like I'm trying to work through like anger and grief and liberation and peace. And it's like, is that when the grief is done? Like, when do we stop grieving? What is that? And yeah, I also agree with what you said, that like time is this non-linear thing, and we exist as we were, as we will be, as we can be, all at once. So really, you guys have said everything that I feel, and this has been a beautiful conversation. And I thank you all for your minds and your insights and your open hearts. And I think I'll just go into the last question we have before we open up to a Q&A from the audience, which is the overwhelming question of what next? How do we move forward from here? Where are we? What's happening? Is it the end? What next?
Honestly, this feels like such a cursed year, and I just want to make it through really. Yeah, and I think I'm really grateful that Victoria has not been very hard hit by COVID, but it has been, I think the West Coast has been really impacted in a lot of different ways, and we see that in the smoke that's coming up. And again, I just want to make it through and have some fun along the way if I can.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. Wow. Danny.
We were just talking before the panel started about how 2020 feels like 10 years packed into one. And I think we talked about how time diluted itself over the past like 10 months that made it feel like we have been doing this for 10 years. Like I got married in October 2019, and I was telling my husband like a while ago that it feels like we have been married for 15 years now. Um, so when I look for what's next, is that I'm hoping that we can see an opening coming up soon. It's there's a saying in Islam, إنما بعد الضيق فرج. Whenever it's tightened up, there's going to be an opening coming up soon. So it feels the darkest hours before the dawn. It feels like it is it feels heartbreaking, and it feels soul crunching every single day. Like, I'm not going to downplay it. It is how the word functions at the moment. Every morning you wake up and you open Twitter and you're like, oh, another disaster, yay. But I would say we just push one step at a time and hope for the best. And to be honest, for us queer folks, for us trans folks, for us folks, like for you folks who are trans, we didn't have any other answer other than this for so long. Like we went through difficult experiences. We have seen our own apocalypses. We have seen the end of the world over and over and over again for us. And the only reason why we are right here talking to you as we speak is because of we were resilient, and we managed to take the next step, and we looked that abyss into the deep of the abyss, and we jumped anyway. So here we are.
Thank you. Yeah, I really feel about how long this year has been. I watched the Black Klansman this morning. It's a fun way to start my day, and it ends with like all these clips from the Virginia protests, and I was like, I can't believe that so much has happened that I kind of forgot about those and all of the horrible things that happened there. And so it's been a long year and a long life and a long ancestry. But like you said, we're still here, and we jumped through and we're looking into it and we're coming back. So yeah, we'll just kind of keep going, I guess, and wait for the expansion. Keep working towards the expansion. Action constantly. Jay Simpson, what's next?
I think what's next is a reckoning of the fact that there are going to have to be a lot of people who bear it all, so many don't have to, and a recognition that there are folks who are doing this hard work and getting their hands messy doing this hard work, who I don't believe they need to be idolized at all, but I do believe that they need to be given space and understanding, and not the villain edit. There are a lot of folks, and I get the villain edit a lot by burning things down. And a lot of folks, they get upset because they're like, there's a fire. And then I always say, like, what is burning though? And it's usually a board of director that's all white, or a child welfare advisory council that refuses to acknowledge Indigenous or trans folks, or university clubs that are all white, and I'm just like, it's not about the flames, it's about what's burning. And for white folks, fire has always meant the end. And for a lot of us, fire has never been the end. And I think what needs to happen is more. We need to start really, really collecting the kindling and collecting the receipts and sinking what needs to be sunk. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong in destroying what was created to destroy us. And it's not an us versus them. We're like, you have no idea how free you will be once this is gone. It's not a thing like us asking for liberation isn't taking it away from you at all. This isn't me taking a piece of your pie away. It's us being able to grow our own wheat and fruit to make our own pies. That's it. It's not about trying to take something from you. Although I will take your wealth and I will eat you, the rich. So, you know, it's those kind of situations, but also at the same time, it's just like, what is next is going to be a lot of messy, hard work. And there are going to come out of it a lot of folks who we think are villains, but they've done a very necessary thing. And that's hard to reckon with. And I would just say we all need to be able to do what must be done.
Wow. Powerful words. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. This has been so incredible. We've got about some time left for any Q&A from the lovely listeners listening in. So there's a Q&A button you can press and type some questions if you'd like. You can specify them to each panelist, or it can be like an open question you would like someone to answer. So we'll give you some time to do that. And in the meantime, I'll just keep telling you all how amazing you were, how incredible this is. And I feel like Futurisms is something I love to talk about or like try to wrestle with, because I feel like, you know, as we're burning things down, we have to also be like working towards like rebuilding, and what is that vision? And yeah, how we don't get lost in our own like anger and grief to create something new and good. And I've really been kind of reckoning with like, what do I actually want to pass down to the children, and like what does that legacy want to look like, if it is a legacy? And what you were saying, Jay, about like the dirty work and being like the villains, and how do you like do this work in a way that's not like in the eye of the public and all of that. But I see a question here, which is, how do you sustain yourself in the context of ongoing or escalating racism and other isms and phobias? How do you sustain to keep going every day? And if you feel like you want to answer that, just jump in, I think.
I mean, copious amount of wine, I guess. I would say there is multiple things that I do. The number one thing that I do is that I leave space between me and this screen. I'm very active on social media. I'm active on Twitter. I'm active on Instagram. But I do this with the intention of this is a persona that is part of who I am. It's an authentic persona, but it is at the end of the day a persona that I'm putting out there for reasons that are valid, like my career, be it, or my activism. And that persona is put there, but it's not everything that I am. There is a space between me and this screen. There's always going to be an intentional space between who I am as a person, who are my friends, what Jay and I talk about when we're on the phone, versus what Jay and I talk about when we're chatting on Twitter. There's both of those experiences are authentic, but one has a lot of more swear words in it.
Revealing our secrets. Well,
I guess.
I wholly agree with the persona thing. Like, there are people who will, especially on dating sites, they'll message me and I'm like, you don't know me. Like, you've seen me perform, but you don't know me. But how I sustain myself is every single day I talk on the phone with Ariel Twist, and I talk to Billy Ray Belcourt, and I talk to people who are my kin, who bring me joy. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I can't do the feasts that I'm used to doing. I'm so used to gathering and having huge parties where everyone is fed and the drinks are flowing and there's quiet rooms and there's an ability to celebrate each other. And KP knows how I party. I usually bring a big old bottle of Henny, and it's so hard to sustain myself now because I'm so used to just like feeding other people joy, and then also like mutually surviving off of other people's joy also. And I think that's something that the pandemic has really inhibited. But right now I'm just watching from the screen the joy of other people.
Thank you. And Serena.
Yeah. To echo Danny, I would say copious amounts of weed. But also, again, I don't really know. I just make it one day at a time, to be honest. And I think certainly this pandemic has elevated all of our stress responses and our trauma responses, you know, and I do fall back into that mode of either fight or flight or floppy or freeze or appease. And I think trying to just embrace that our bodies are going to react the way that they are going to react, and that this violence is going to be happening, and embrace that, but also try to move on and reject it when you can. And then also decide if there are situations where you're just going to let it slide, and that doesn't mean that it's okay, but that doesn't mean that you're going to dwell on it. And I am fortunate to, I think we're all fortunate in some ways that this pandemic, certainly for some folks, has meant that we're respecting consent a lot more. We're not intruding on other people's space in the same way. Or at least some of us are, and some of us are still being shitty or even being more shitty. And coming at this work from the lens of being someone who works with survivors of sexualized violence and someone who is also a survivor of sexualized violence, I just think every day about if I was in the position of supporting myself and being that peer support person to myself, what would I say? And what would I do? Yeah, counseling has been really good. I'm really grateful to have health benefits. But yeah, the world is shit, and it's not getting better anytime soon. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. It's looking about 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to answer one last question really quick, just like first thought, best thought. What other books would you recommend in addition to Octavia's Brood? And just like thank you for everything nice. So some good book recommendations, and then we'll call it.
I would say Eden Robinson's Trickster series. Fantastic. Anything Octavia Butler, anything Rebecca Rowanhorse. There's just so much available.
Thank you.
I would say Burning Sugar, poems by Cecily Bell Plain. It's fantastic. It was just released by the Vivek publishing imprint. And I would say also The Gospel of Breaking by Jillian Christmas, who is everything. You should see Jillian Christmas performing live. Oh my God, isn't she just everything? Every word on this book is just I can't. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I've got so many books here that I could highlight. I mean, I've got Ariel's book here, Disintegrate Associate. I've got Sala's book, Lyric Sexology. David Lee's book just came out this year, Mythical Man.
Oh my God, yes. I love that.
So many
David
others.
Lee's amazing.
Yeah, anything by Metonymy Press, anything by, Arsenal Pulp puts out so many amazing books. Yeah, and one day, hopefully one of my own. So we'll see.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your recommendations and your words and your work. All of this has been amazing, very rejuvenating and uplifting and thought-provoking. So thank you all so much, and I will pass it back. to Susan. Sandra, sorry, Sandra.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you especially to our great moderator, KP Dennis, and our fantastic readers today, Serena Bandar, Danny Ramadan, and Jay Simpson. It was amazing to hear you. If you're interested in purchasing any of the books featured today, please support festival sponsor and VFA bookseller Monroe's Books. You can find the books featured during the festival in store and online at monroebooks.com. There are many more festival events to enjoy, so please visit the website, victoriafestivalofauthors.ca, to view the festival program. Our website also features Q&As with all the authors participating in VFA 2020, as well as a place for you to sign up for our newsletter. If you would like to support the festival in other ways, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and encourage your friends to attend one of our many upcoming events. You can also make a tax-deductible donation to Victoria Festival of Authors through the website or on VFA's page at Canada Helps. Your donations help keep VFA an engaging, accessible, and sustainable festival. We hope to see you at our next event, Truth, Trauma, Beauty, Beast, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific Time. That event features authors Amanda Leduc, Michael Pryor, and Jesse Thistle, and is moderated by Carla Funk. Thanks again for joining us. I hope we'll see you next time.